I'm Sarah Mitchell, 28, and I thought becoming a mother would bring my family closer together. Instead, when I announced my pregnancy, my sister Emma rolled her eyes and said, "Great. Another burden for the family to support." My mother nodded in agreement, whispering about how I'd never amount to anything and would probably need handouts to raise my child. What they didn't know was that while they saw me as the family failure, I'd been quietly building a tech startup that had just secured a $50 million acquisition deal. The trust fund I'd set up for my unborn daughter contained more money than my entire family had ever seen combined. But I wasn't ready to reveal that yet, not until they showed me exactly who they really were. Like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should support you most. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant understanding your place in the hierarchy, and mine was firmly at the bottom. The family photo from last Christmas tells the whole story. There's Emma, radiant and laughing in the center, flanked by our parents who beam at her like she's their greatest achievement. And there I am, half hidden behind my father's shoulder, looking uncomfortable in a sweater I bought myself because no one thought to ask what I wanted for Christmas. Emma has always been the golden child, despite being 26 and unemployed for the past 3 years. She has a degree in art history that she's never used, unless you count using it as an excuse for why she can't find work. The market is so competitive, she'd sigh dramatically whenever anyone brought up job hunting. I'm an artist, not a corporate drone like Sarah. Meanwhile, our parents continue to fund her lifestyle without question. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country, all charged to Dad's credit card. When Emma wanted to take a pottery class last summer, they happily paid the $800 fee. When I mentioned needing new tires for my 10-year-old Honda, Mom suggested I budget better. The double standard became crystal clear during family dinners. Emma would regale everyone with stories about her latest creative endeavor while I sat, quietly picking at my food. If I ever tried to share something about my work, Dad would check his phone, or Mom would suddenly remember something urgent in the kitchen. Sarah's always been the practical one, Mom would say, as if being practical was somehow disappointing. Not like Emma, who sees the world differently. What they meant was that Emma was special and I was ordinary. Emma was creative and I was boring. Emma deserved support and I should figure things out on my own. I learned early to keep my achievements to myself. When I graduated summa cum laude from college, they attended the ceremony but spent most of it talking about Emma's latest painting. When I got my first promotion at work, I mentioned it over dinner, only to have the conversation immediately shift to Emma's plans for a gallery showing that never materialized. So I stopped sharing. I stopped expecting recognition or support. I channeled all that hurt and disappointment into determination, working longer hours, taking on bigger projects, building something they couldn't ignore even if they never knew about it. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they saw me as the family disappointment, I was the only one actually building a future. But I kept that knowledge close to my chest, like a secret weapon waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Asterisk, the acquisition contract sat in my safe, a 40-page document that represented 4 years of 18-hour days and countless sacrifices. TechFlow Solutions, my baby, my pride. My secret had just been purchased by a Fortune 500 company for $50 million. And my family had no idea. It started in my tiny apartment 4 years ago. While Emma was posting Instagram photos of her latest brunch adventure, I was hunched over my laptop at 2 a.m., coding a revolutionary project management software that would streamline workflow for small businesses. The idea came from watching my friend's bakery struggle with inventory management and employee scheduling. I saw a gap in the market and decided to fill it. The first year was brutal. I'd work my day job at a mid-level tech company, then come home and code until dawn. My social life disappeared. I lived on coffee and determination. ignoring my family's subtle hints that I was working too hard and should find some balance like Emma. Emma, meanwhile, was posting about her creative process while living rent-free in our parents' guest house. She'd sleep until noon, then spend her afternoons at coffee shops, sketching in notebooks that she called her visual journals. Our parents praised her for following her passion, while I was dismissed as too focused on work. The breakthrough came in year 2 when I landed my first major client, a growing restaurant chain that needed help managing their multi-location operations. My software saved them thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Word spread quickly through their network, and suddenly I had more clients than I could handle. I hired contractors, refined the software, and slowly built a real business, all while maintaining my day job and pretending nothing had changed. When I finally quit my corporate position to focus on TechFlow full-time, I told my family I was freelancing and trying to make it work. "Oh, Sarah," Mom sighed. "Are you sure that's wise? You had such a stable job." "Maybe you should figure it out," Dad said, not looking up from his newspaper. "Or maybe you should come to her senses and find something more reliable." They assumed I was, struggling, taking odd jobs to pay rent on my small apartment. They had no idea I'd already moved to a beautiful downtown loft and was driving a BMW I'd paid for in cash. I dressed down for family gatherings, parking my car around the corner and arriving in Uber, rides to maintain the illusion of their disappointment daughter. The irony was delicious. While they worried about my unstable career, I was building something extraordinary. While they funded Emma's endless pursuits of finding herself, I was finding success beyond their wildest imagination. The acquisition offer came through my attorney on a Tuesday morning. The company had been watching TechFlow's growth for months, impressed by our client retention rate and expansion potential. They wanted to buy us outright, keep me on as a consultant, and give me equity in their larger operations. I signed the papers on a Friday afternoon, officially becoming wealthier than my parents had ever dreamed of being. I celebrated alone, with a bottle of champagne and a plan for the perfect moment to reveal everything. The law office smelled like leather and success, a far cry from the modest spaces I'd grown accustomed to. Margaret Chen, one of the city's top estate planning attorneys, spread the trust fund documents across her mahogany desk like a battle plan. "This is quite substantial," she said, adjusting her glasses. $45 million is more than most people see in several lifetimes. I nodded, my hand instinctively moving to my growing belly. At 5 months pregnant, the reality of impending motherhood was becoming more concrete each day. Unlike my family's reaction, this felt like pure joy and possibility. "I want it completely protected," I explained. "My daughter should never have to worry about money for education, housing, healthcare, anything she needs. But I also want safeguards against anyone trying to manipulate or exploit her because of this wealth." Margaret made notes as I spoke. "We'll establish a revocable trust. With you as the initial trustee, the principal will be protected until she reaches 25, with distributions available for education and legitimate needs before then. We'll also include provisions for additional trustees if something happens to you." The paperwork was extensive but necessary. We structured it so that my daughter would receive monthly distributions for living expenses starting at 18, larger amounts for college and graduate school, and full access to the principal at 25. But there were conditions. No, access to funds for anyone who would demonstrate a manipulative or exploitative behavior toward our family. This clause here, Margaret pointed to a specific section, allows you to restrict access based on family relationships. If someone has shown a pattern of emotional or financial manipulation, they can be completely cut off from any involvement with the trust. Perfect. I thought about Emma's constant requests for money, her assumption that she was entitled to support without contribution. I thought about my parents' willingness to fund her lifestyle while questioning every dollar I spent on myself. I also want educational provisions that go beyond traditional college, I continued. Trade schools, artistic programs, entrepreneurship ventures, whatever she's passionate about. I don't want her limited by narrow definitions of success. We spent 3 hours crafting the perfect protection for my daughter's future. The trust would be managed by a reputable financial firm with strict oversight and reporting requirements. Every dollar would be accounted for, every distribution documented as I signed the final papers. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever happened with my family, whatever cruel comments they made about my burden, my daughter would be financially secure for life. She'd have opportunities I never dreamed of, and she'd never have to depend on people who saw her as inconvenient. When will you tell them about this? Margaret asked as she organized the documents. I smiled, thinking about the perfect moment I'd been planning. When they've shown me exactly who they are, I want there to be no doubt about their true feelings. Before they know what they're missing, the trust fund documents went into my safe next to the acquisition contract. 2 pieces of paper that represented complete financial freedom and the power to rewrite my family's dynamics forever. My daughter might be called a burden now, but she was actually the most privileged child any of them would ever know, and they had no idea what was coming. The Venmo notification pinned on my phone during a client meeting. Another request from Emma, $500 for emergency car repairs. This was the 3rd time this month, and it was only the 15th. I screenshotted it immediately, adding it to the growing folder on my phone labeled evidence. Emma's pattern was predictable. She'd send money requests with vague descriptions like help a sister out or temporary loan promise to pay back. She never paid anything back, and our parents never questioned why she needed constant financial assistance while living rent-free in their house. After the meeting, I called Mom to discuss baby shower plans. Within 5 minutes, she brought up Emma's situation. She's having such a hard time finding the right job, Mom explained. You know how the art world is? It's all about connections and timing. She can't just take any old position. What about the car repair? I asked, already knowing the answer. Oh, that. Well, Emma doesn't have savings like you do. She's been putting all her energy into her portfolio development, like I do. The assumption that I had extra money lying around while they funded Emma's lifestyle was infuriating. They thought I was scraping by on freelance work, yet somehow expected me to have emergency funds while their actual dependent needed constant bailouts. Actually, Mom, I'm pretty tight right now with the baby coming and everything. Silence. Then, oh, well, I'm sure Emma will figure something out. She would figure it out. All right. Dad would transfer the money within an hour, just like he always did. Emma had perfected the art of manufactured emergencies, car trouble, unexpected bills, networking expenses that somehow always involved expensive dinners and shopping trips. I scrolled through my phone, looking at months of similar requests. $300 for professional headshots that became a spa day. $400 for art supplies that turned into a weekend getaway. $650 for portfolio printing that funded a shopping spree. Based on the Instagram posts she shared immediately after, the most insulting part was how she framed these requests. Hey sis, can you help me out? As if we were partners in some family support system. As if I wasn't the one growing a baby while building a career. As if I wasn't the one who'd never asked our parents for a single dollar since graduating college. Meanwhile, Emma's social media painted a picture of carefree abundance. Designer coffee drinks, trendy restaurants, boutique shopping hauls all funded by our parents, while she complained about her financial struggles to anyone who'd listen. Last week, she'd posted a photo of herself at an expensive art gallery, opening wearing a dress that cost more than most people's rent. The caption read, Investing in inspiration, sometimes you have to spend money to make money in the creative world. What creative world? What money? She hadn't sold a single piece of art or earned $1 from her passion in 3 years. But she'd mastered the art of making other people fund her lifestyle while maintaining the illusion of sophisticated. Struggle. I declined the Venmo request and blocked notifications from Emma's account. I had screenshots of everything, every request, every excuse, every pattern of manipulation. The evidence folder was growing thick with documentation of exactly how my family viewed money, responsibility, and fairness. When the time came to reveal everything, I wanted them to see the complete picture. How they'd nickeled and dimed me while hemorrhaging money for Emma, how they'd questioned my financial decisions, while enabling her complete lack of accountability. My daughter would never have to navigate this kind of favoritism. She'd never have to watch her parents fund a sibling's dreams while dismissing her own achievements. The trust fund guaranteed that. But more importantly, I was going to break the cycle entirely. Emma could keep sending her requests. I had bigger plans brewing. Planning a baby shower on a tight budget meant getting creative with decorations from the dollar store and making my own centerpieces. I'd invited 20 people, friends, co-workers, a few family members, and received enthusiastic RSVPs from most of them. The guest list I'd carefully compiled showed genuine excitement from my chosen family of friends, while my actual family's responses ranged from reluctant to non-existent. Emma had grudgingly agreed to come, but not without commentary. "Is this really the best venue you could find?" she asked when I mentioned hosting it at my friend Jessica's house. "I mean, I guess it's fine for a small gathering." Mom's response was even more telling. "Well, I suppose we should do something to celebrate," she said, as if the baby shower was an obligation rather than a joy. "Though I do think you might be getting ahead of yourself with all this planning. Babies are so expensive, Sarah. Are you sure you're ready for this responsibility?" The day of the shower, I arrived early to help Jessica set up. We'd spent the previous evening crafting decorations, paper flowers in soft pink and gold, mason jar centerpieces with baby's breath, a photo backdrop made from streamers and balloons. Everything looked beautiful and welcoming. Exactly the celebration I'd hoped for. My friends started arriving right on time, bringing gifts and genuine excitement. Coworkers from my old job showed up with thoughtful presents and stories about their own parenting experiences. Jessica's mom, who barely knew me, had knitted a gorgeous baby blanket because every baby deserves something made with love. Emma arrived 30 minutes late, barely glanced at the decorations, and immediately started photographing the gift table. "Oh, this is so quaint," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "Very DIY. How resourceful of you, Sarah." Mom followed shortly after, carrying a small gift bag and wearing the expression of someone fulfilling an unpleasant duty. She surveyed the room, taking in the handmade decorations and modest spread of finger foods. "Well, this is certainly creative," she said to Emma, not bothering to lower her voice. "I suppose when you're on a budget, you have to make do." I watched my friends' faces as they registered the subtle cruelty of these comments. Jessica squeezed my arm supportively, while my former colleague Maria raised her eyebrows in disbelief. The contrast was stark, genuine love and excitement from my chosen family, veiled criticism and reluctant participation from my blood relatives. During the gift opening, the difference became even more pronounced. My friends had clearly put thought into their presents, practical items like a diaper bag and baby monitor, sentimental gifts like a memory book, fun surprises like tiny outfits in perfect colors. Even people I barely knew had chosen gifts with care and consideration. Emma's gift was a generic baby outfit from a discount store, still in the plastic packaging with the clearance sticker visible. "I wasn't sure what you needed." She shrugged when I thanked her. Mom's gift was even worse, a single package of newborn diapers and a card that read, Congratulations on your new arrival in generic script. No personalization, no thought, nothing. That indicated she was excited about becoming a grandmother, but the final insult came during the advice sharing portion of the shower. When asked to share wisdom for the new mom, my friends offered heartfelt encouragement about trusting my instincts, embracing the chaos, and remembering to take care of myself. Emma passed entirely. I don't really have advice about babies, she said with a laugh. Mom's contribution was devastating. Well, she said, looking directly at me, I suppose my advice would be to really think carefully about whether you're ready for this level of responsibility. Babies change everything, and once you have one, there's no going back. Some people aren't cut out for motherhood, and there's no shame in admitting that before it's too late. The room fell silent. Jessica's mouth actually dropped open. Maria looked like she wanted to throw something at my mother. I think Sarah is going to be an amazing mother, Jessica said firmly, breaking the uncomfortable silence. This baby is lucky to have someone so thoughtful and prepared. The shower continued, but the damage was done. My own mother had essentially suggested I should consider giving up my baby at a celebration meant to welcome her into the world. In front of a room full of people who'd come to show their support and love Dot, as guests were leaving, Emma pulled me aside. You know, Sarah, Mom might have a point. Babies are really expensive and you're not exactly in the most stable situation. Maybe you should think about your options. I smiled and nodded, adding this moment to my mental collection of exactly how my family viewed my pregnancy. They saw my daughter as a burden, a mistake, a problem to be solved rather than a blessing to be celebrated. What they didn't know was that their lack of support was actually a gift. It was showing me exactly who they were when it mattered most, and it was going to make my eventual revelation so much sweeter. The hospital pre-registration forms were spread across my dining table, and every blank space requiring an emergency contact felt like a small defeat. I stared at the paper, pen hovering over the line asking for primary support person during labor. I'd already filled in the obvious information, my name, address, insurance details. But when it came to listing people who would be there for me during the most vulnerable moment of my life, the paper remained mostly blank. Jessica would be my emergency contact and backup support person. She'd volunteered immediately when I mentioned my concerns about going through labor alone. Are you kidding me? She'd said. I would be honored to be there with you. Your family is crazy if they think they're too busy for this. My parents' response to my due date had been typically disappointing. Oh, that's next month? Mom had said when I reminded her I was entering my final weeks. I hope it's not during Emma's gallery showing. She's been planning this exhibition for months. Emma's gallery showing, the same exhibition that had been in planning for over a year, but had never materialized into actual dates or venues. But somehow it took priority over their first grandchild's birth. Dad's reaction was equally telling. You'll be fine, he'd said dismissively. Women have been having babies forever. It's natural. Natural, yes. But that didn't mean I wanted to go through it completely alone. I filled in Jessica's information as my primary contact, then added my friend Maria as secondary. Two people who'd known me for less than 5 years cared more about being present for this moment than the family who'd known me my entire life. The birth plan section was easier to complete. I'd researched everything extensively, taken childbirth classes, prepared for various scenarios. Unlike my family's assumption that I was unprepared and overwhelmed, I'd actually planned more thoroughly than most first-time mothers. I'd also prepared financially for every possibility. Private room, extended stay if needed. Additional medical support all covered without concern about insurance limitations or out-of-pocket expenses. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my family worried about my ability to afford a baby, I could probably buy the entire maternity ward. My hospital bag was packed and ready by the door. Everything I'd need for a 3-day stay, plus comfort items and practical supplies. No one had offered to help me prepare, so I'd handled every detail myself. The most painful part of the preparation was realizing how completely I'd been abandoned. During what should have been a time of excitement and support, I was navigating everything solo. While other expectant mothers posted photos of family members assembling cribs and organizing baby clothes, I was doing everything myself. But in some ways, their absence was liberating. I didn't have to manage anyone else's expectations or accommodate their schedules. I could focus entirely on preparing for my daughter's arrival without worrying about family drama or criticism. Sealed the completed forms in an envelope and set them aside. Tomorrow, I'd drop them off at the hospital and finalize the last details. Then it would just be a matter of waiting for labor to begin. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Hey, do you know when you're having the baby? I want to make sure it doesn't conflict with my exhibition planning." I stared at the message for a long moment, then screenshot it and added it to my evidence folder. Even now, in my final weeks of pregnancy, she was treating my labor like an inconvenience to be scheduled around her hypothetical art show. I typed back, "Babies come when they're ready. I'll let you know when she arrives," but privately, I wondered if I would. Did I really want people who saw my daughter as a burden to be among the first to meet her? Did I want their reluctant, obligatory visits to taint those precious first moments? Maybe it was better this way. Maybe going through labor without them would be the final piece of evidence I needed about who they really were. Asterisk labor started at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, with contractions that woke me from the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. For a moment I lay in bed wondering if this was really it. Then another wave of pain confirmed that my daughter had decided it was time to meet the world. I'd planned this moment carefully. My hospital bag was ready, Jessica was on standby, and I had a clear plan for who to call and when. But first, I decided to test my family one more time. At 4:30 a.m. Between contractions, I sent a simple text to the family group chat. "In labor. Heading to hospital soon." Then I waited. Jessica responded within 3 minutes. "Oh my God, I'm getting dressed now. Which hospital? I'll meet you there." Maria texted 5 minutes later, so excited. "You've got this, Mama. Call if you need anything." My family's silence was deafening. By 6 a.m., I was checked into the hospital and settling into my labor and delivery room. Jessica arrived shortly after, bringing coffee for herself and ice chips for me. She'd clearly rushed over without thinking about her own needs, focused entirely on being there for support. "Have you heard from your family?" she asked gently, helping me get comfortable. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak about their absence without crying. The contractions were intensifying, and I needed to focus my energy on labor, not on disappointment. At 8 a.m., Emma finally responded to the group chat. "Oh wow, really? Today, I have that meeting with the gallery curator at 10. Can you keep me posted?" Mom's response came an hour later. "That's exciting, dear. I'm sure you're in good hands. The hospital staff knows what they're doing." No mention of coming to the hospital. No offer of support. Just acknowledgement that something was happening in my life that didn't directly involve them. Dad never responded at all. Labor progressed steadily throughout the morning. Jessica stayed by my side, helping me through contractions, adjusting pillows, playing calming music from her phone. She'd taken the day off work without hesitation, treating my labor like the significant life event it was. "Your family is missing out," she said during a quiet moment between contractions. "This is incredible. You're incredible." Around noon, my water broke and everything accelerated. The nurse called my doctor, monitors were adjusted, and suddenly the room filled with purposeful medical activity. This was really happening. I was about to meet my daughter Dot at 2:17 p.m. After 9 hours of labor, she arrived. Perfect and beautiful, and absolutely worth every moment of pain and struggle. The doctor placed her on my chest, and I felt a love so overwhelming it took my breath away. "She's gorgeous," Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at those tiny fingers." My daughter's eyes opened, and she looked directly at me with the most serious expression, as if she was taking inventory of this new world she'd entered. I knew in that moment that everything I'd done to prepare for her future had been exactly right. The nurse asked if I wanted to call anyone to share the news. I looked at my phone and saw no missed calls, no concerned texts asking for updates, just silence from the people who should have been waiting anxiously for word about their first grandchild. "Just Jessica for now," I said. "She's all the family I need right here." Later, as I filled out the birth certificate information, I realized something profound had happened. I'd given birth surrounded by love and support, just not from the people I'd expected. Jessica had been more present and caring than my own family, and my daughter's first moments had been filled with genuine joy and celebration. When I finally sent the family group chat a photo of my daughter along with her statistics: 7 pounds. 6 ounces, 20 inches long, born at 2:17 p.m. The responses were telling. Emma, "Cute. Congrats. Mom, she's lovely. Get some rest." Dad, still nothing. I looked at my daughter sleeping peacefully in my arms and made a promise. She would never question whether she was wanted, valued, or loved. She would never have to beg for attention or support from people who should give it freely. And she would definitely never be called a burden by anyone who mattered, because the people who mattered were already here, holding her, celebrating her arrival, and planning to be part of her life in meaningful ways. The hospital visitor log by my bed remained embarrassingly empty of family names. 3 days post-delivery, and not one blood relative had walked through my door. Jessica had been there every day, bringing real food and helping with feeding schedules. Maria had stopped by twice with flowers and baby clothes. Even my former boss had sent a beautiful arrangement with a note about taking all the time I needed. But my family? Nowhere to be found. Emma's excuse came via text on day 2. "Really want to visit, but I think I'm coming down with something. Don't want to get the baby sick." This was followed immediately by an Instagram story showing her at a trendy brunch spot, clearly healthy and social. Mom's reason was even more insulting. "The hospital is so far from our house, and you know how your father feels about medical facilities. We'll see you when you get home." The hospital was 23 minutes from their house. I'd driven there myself while in active labor. Dad maintained his silence, as if ignoring the situation would make it disappear. Meanwhile, Jessica had practically moved into my room. She'd learned to change diapers faster than I had mastered the art of swaddling, and spent hours just holding my daughter while I recovered. Her Instagram posts showed genuine joy and pride, auntie duties in full effect. And this little angel has stolen my heart. The contrast was stark and painful. People who'd known me for a few years were celebrating my daughter's arrival like a family blessing, while my actual family treated it like an inconvenience to be acknowledged from a distance. On day 3, a nurse named Patricia made an observation that hit harder than I expected. "You have such wonderful friends," she said while checking my recovery progress. "Your baby is lucky to have such devoted people in her life." "What about family?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why. I was still hoping for different. Patricia glanced at the empty visitor log and chose her words carefully. "Sometimes the family we choose loves us better than the family we're born into. That little girl is going to grow up knowing she's surrounded by people who showed up when it mattered." She was right. In the 3 days since my daughter's birth, I'd received flowers from colleagues, cards from neighbors, meal deliveries from friends, and constant support from people who had no obligation to care about us. My chosen family had rallied around us with enthusiasm and love. My blood family had offered excuses and distance. That evening, as I prepared for discharge, I made a decision. I would not beg for their attention or involvement. I would not make excuses for their absence or try to manufacture connection that didn't exist naturally. My daughter deserved better than reluctant grandparents and an indifferent aunt. When the discharge paperwork asked for emergency contacts and support system information, I listed Jessica first, followed by Maria and 2 other close friends. Under family notifications, I left it blank. The nurse processing my paperwork looked confused. No family contacts. The people who matter are already listed, I said firmly. As Jessica helped me gather our things and prepare to leave, I looked around, the room where my daughter had spent her first days of life. This space had been filled with love and celebration, just not from the sources I'd expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Hope you're doing well, dear. Let us know when you're ready for visitors." Ready for visitors? As if they were casual acquaintances waiting for an invitation rather than grandparents who should have been camping out in the hallway for the chance to meet their first grandchild. I screenshot the message and added it to my evidence folder, then deleted it without responding. "Ready to take your daughter home?" Jessica asked, carefully strapping the car seat into place. "Home. To the beautiful nursery I'd prepared myself, the support system I built with people who actually cared, and the new life I was creating for the 2 of us. My family's absence during these crucial first days had given me a gift: absolute clarity about who they were and what they valued. When the time came to reveal everything, there would be no ambiguity about how they behaved when it mattered most. They'd chosen their priorities, and my daughter and I weren't among them. Asterisk. Coming home from the hospital with a newborn should have been a moment of family celebration and support. Instead, I unlocked my apartment door alone, carrying my daughter in her car seat while Jessica managed the discharge bags and flowers from well-wishers. The nursery I'd prepared was a testament to doing everything myself. The crib I'd assembled alone, reading instructions while 8 months pregnant. The changing table I'd organized with supplies I'd researched and purchased without input from anyone. The rocking chair where I'd spend countless late-night feedings, bought with my own money because no one had offered to help with nursery essentials. "This is absolutely beautiful," Jessica said, taking in the soft pink and white decor, the carefully arranged books and toys, the organized closet full of clothes in every size. "You've thought of everything." I had thought of everything because I'd had to. While other expectant mothers posted photos of family members assembling baby furniture and organizing shower gifts, I'd handled every detail solo. The expensive baby monitor system, the top-of-the-line stroller, the organic cotton everything, all purchased without concern for budget because my family had no idea what I could actually afford. My neighbors had been more supportive than my relatives. Mrs. Chen from across the hall had brought homemade soup and offered to help with grocery shopping. The young couple next door had volunteered to walk my dog while I was in the hospital. Even the building's maintenance supervisor had checked in to make sure everything was working properly in my unit. But for my family, nothing. No casseroles, no offers to help with laundry, no excited visits to meet their granddaughter. Just silence and absence when I needed support most. The most telling moment came that first evening at home. My daughter was having trouble latching during feeding, and I was exhausted and emotional. New mother anxiety combined with physical recovery made everything feel overwhelming. I called Mom, hoping for some maternal wisdom or even just reassurance. "Oh, that's normal," she said dismissively. "You'll figure it out. Babies are resilient." "Could you maybe come over? I could use some help, and I thought you might want to spend time with her." "Well, we're quite busy today. Emma's meeting with a potential gallery owner, and we promised to help her prepare her portfolio. Maybe next week?" Next week, my 3-day-old daughter was having feeding difficulties. I was recovering from childbirth, and they were too busy helping Emma prepare for another meeting that would likely lead nowhere. I hung up and called Jessica instead, who arrived 30 minutes later with takeout dinner and spent the evening helping me practice different feeding positions until we found one that worked. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Friends checked in daily with texts and calls. Coworkers sent gift cards for meal delivery services. My former boss had arranged for a cleaning service to come twice a week for the first month. My family sent occasional texts asking how things were going, but never followed up with actual offers of help or visits. The package deliveries told the story of who really cared. Baby gifts from friends and colleagues arrived, daily practical items like extra bottles and burp cloths, thoughtful surprises like milestone cards and memory books. Everything I could possibly need was provided by people who genuinely wanted to support us. From my family. Not a single package. Emma did stop by once unannounced. While I was feeding the baby in my pajamas at 2 p.m., she stayed exactly 15 minutes, took a few selfies with her niece for social media, and left without offering any help or asking how I was managing. She's cute, Emma said, already checking her phone for responses to the photos she'd posted. Babies are so much work, though. I don't know how you're going to handle it all. The implication was clear. I was in over my head, struggling with a responsibility I wasn't equipped to handle. What she didn't see was the nursery stocked with everything money could buy. The meal delivery subscriptions, the cleaning service, the state-of-the-art baby gear that made every aspect of newborn care easier. She saw what she expected to see, her struggling sister barely managing an unplanned burden. I let her maintain that illusion well. I documented every moment of their absence and indifference. Each day that passed without genuine support or interest from my family was another piece of evidence about their true priorities. My daughter was thriving despite their absence, surrounded by love from people who'd chosen to be part of our lives. When the time came to reveal everything, I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd missed during these precious early days, and exactly what they'd lose access to going forward. The family group chat notification appeared on my phone while I was changing my daughter's diaper at 3 a.m. Sleep deprived and emotional, I probably should have ignored it until morning. Instead, I opened it and found a conversation that shattered whatever remaining hope I'd held for my family's decency. Emma had started it. Anyone else wondering how Sarah's handling the baby? She looked pretty overwhelmed when I stopped by. Mom's response: new mothers always struggle at first. Some adopt better than others. I just hope she's not in over her head. Dad, breaking his usual silence: maybe this will teach her some responsibility. Can't just wing it like she does with everything else. Emma again. I mean, she never really thought this through, did she? Having a baby when you're barely making ends meet seems pretty selfish. Mom, well, it's done now. The child didn't ask to be born into this situation. We'll probably end up helping financially whether we want to or not. Emma, oh, probably. Get ready for the constant requests for money. The emergency expenses that somehow become our problem. Dad, at least now she understands what real responsibility looks like. Maybe it'll motivate her to get serious about her career instead of this freelance nonsense. I stared at my phone screen, reading and rereading their words while my beautiful daughter slept peacefully in my arms. They weren't just discussing my struggles, they were actively mocking them, making fun of my exhaustion, my perceived financial instability, my life choices. But the worst part was their assumption that they'd inevitably be asked to provide financial support. The entitlement of people who'd never offered a single dollar of help, never brought a meal, never spent a night helping with feedings, already resenting the imaginary burden I might place on them. Emma continued. Remember when she was in college and always acted like she was so independent. Now look where that attitude got her. Mom, I tried to warn her about rushing into this. Some people just have to learn the hard way. The cruelty was breathtaking. I was 3 weeks postpartum, adjusting to life with a newborn, managing everything, alone because they'd chosen not to help, and they were using my natural new mother. Exhaustion as evidence of my failure. I screenshot every message, my hands shaking with rage and hurt. This wasn't concerned family discussing how to support a struggling relative. This was mockery, judgment, and preemptive resentment about imaginary future requests for help. The baby shifted in my arms, making the soft sounds that meant she'd wake soon for another feeding. I looked down at her perfect face, thinking about how they'd called her a burden before she was born, and were now treating her birth as confirmation of my poor judgment. She deserved so much better than grandparents, who saw her as a mistake, and an aunt who viewed her as an inconvenience. But the chat wasn't finished. Emma, at least we know what we're dealing with now. The constant drama, the financial stress, the guilt trips about not helping enough. Dad, we'll set boundaries. Help when we can, but not enable the poor planning. Mom, exactly. Tough love. Maybe this experience will finally make her grow up. I turned off my phone and focused on my daughter's feeding, letting the rhythm of her sucking soothe my anger. They had no idea what they were talking about. No idea that I was financially secure beyond their wildest dreams. No idea that I'd never asked them for a single favor or dollar. No idea that their tough love and boundaries were irrelevant because I was already completely independent, but more importantly, they had no idea what they just revealed about themselves. This conversation wasn't happening in the heat of an argument or during a stressful moment. This was their honest assessment of me and my situation, shared in what they thought was a private family discussion. They'd shown me exactly who they were in the darkest moment of early motherhood. People who would mock my struggles instead of offering support, who assumed I'd become a financial burden instead of celebrating my independence, who viewed my daughter as evidence of poor judgment instead of a blessing to be cherished. I eventually revealed the truth about my financial situation and my daughter's trust fund. I wanted them to remember this conversation. I wanted them to recall their cruel assumptions and mocking tone when they realized what they'd lost access to with their judgment and absence. The group chat had given me the final piece of evidence I needed. Not only had they failed to support us when we needed it most, they'd actively ridiculed our situation behind my back. My daughter would never know. This version of her extended family existed. By the time she was old enough to understand family dynamics, these people would be distant memories. If they were remembered at all, *** Margaret Chan's business card had been sitting on my kitchen counter for weeks. A reminder of the conversation I needed to have about next steps. My daughter was now 6 weeks old, and I was ready to begin planning the revelation that would change everything. The law office felt different this time. Less about protection and preparation, more about strategy and justice. Margaret greeted me with the warmth of someone who'd become an ally in this complex family drama. "How's motherhood treating you?" she asked as we settled into her office. "Better than my family predicted," I said dryly. "Which brings me to why I'm here." I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the screenshots I'd collected. The group chat conversation, the Venmo requests from Emma, the text messages showing their absence during crucial moments. Margaret reviewed everything with the careful attention of someone who'd seen family dynamics destroy relationships before. "This is quite a pattern of behavior," she said. "Have they offered any support since the baby was born?" "None. No visits, no help, no gifts. They're too busy enabling my sister's lifestyle, while assuming I'll eventually become a financial burden they'll need to manage. And they still have no idea about your actual financial situation? None whatsoever?" As far as they know, I'm a struggling single mother, barely making ends meet through freelance work. Margaret made notes as we talked. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish with the revelation? I'd been thinking about this question for weeks. I want them to understand the consequences of their choices. They've shown me exactly who they are during the most important time of my life. I want them to realize what they lost through their judgment and absence. And after the revelation, what kind of relationship, if any, do you want with them going forward? This was the harder question. I'm not sure yet. But I want any future relationship to be based on truth, not on their assumptions about my failures or their expectations of eventually supporting me. We discussed the logistics of the revelation carefully. Margaret recommended documenting everything thoroughly before moving forward, not just their recent behavior, but the entire pattern of favoritism and financial manipulation that had characterized my relationship with them. You'll want to be prepared for every possible response, she advised. Shock, anger, disbelief, attempts at manipulation. Some families react to this kind of revelation by trying to gaslight the person into believing they're being unfair or unreasonable. I thought about Emma's skill at manipulation, my parents' tendency to rewrite history when confronted with uncomfortable truths. They'd probably claim they'd always been supportive, that I was overreacting to minor slights, that families should. Forgive and forget? What about legal protections? I asked. Can they challenge the trust fund or try to involve themselves in my daughter's financial future? The trust is ironclad, Margaret assured me. They have no legal standing to challenge it, and the structure we created specifically prevents manipulation or exploitation. Your daughter's financial security is completely protected. We spent an hour planning the perfect moment for revelation. It needed to be a setting where they couldn't escape or minimize the conversation, where I had complete control of the narrative, where the full impact of their behavior would be undeniable. Family gatherings are often ideal, Margaret suggested. Somewhere familiar but formal enough that they'll feel obligated to stay and listen. A dinner invitation. Something important enough that they'd feel compelled to attend, intimate enough that honest conversation would be expected. I could control every aspect, the timing, the setting, the information revealed. One more thing, Margaret said as our meeting concluded. Are you prepared for the possibility that this revelation might end these relationships permanently? Some families can't recover from this kind of truth-telling. I thought about my daughter sleeping peacefully in her carrier beside my chair. I thought about the family I built with Jessica and Maria and my other chosen relatives. I thought about the group chat where they'd mocked my struggles and predicted my failures. They ended the relationships already, I said. They just don't know it yet. Margaret handed me her card again, though I already had her contact information memorized. Call me when you're ready to move forward. And remember, you're not doing this to hurt them. You're doing this to establish the truth about who you are and what kind of relationship is possible going forward. As I strapped my daughter's car seat into my BMW, I felt a sense of calm determination. The planning phase was almost complete. Soon, very soon, my family would learn exactly who they'd been so quick to judge and dismiss. And then we'd see who really needed to learn about responsibility and consequences. The family dinner invitation required careful crafting. It needed to sound important enough that they'd prioritize attending over Emma's usual social plans, but not so formal that they'd become suspicious. After several drafts, I settled on something that struck the right tone of significance without revealing my true intentions. I'd like to invite everyone to dinner this Saturday at 6 p.m. I have some important news to share about my future and want the family together to discuss it. Please let me know if you can make it. It's really important to me that we're all there. I sent it to the family group chat and waited for responses. Emma replied first. What kind of news? Is everything okay? I'd rather discuss it when we're all together, I responded. It's good news, but I want to share it properly. Mom's response was predictably cautious. I hope this isn't about asking for help. Sarah, we've talked about boundaries. Audacity was breathtaking. They'd never been asked for help, had never offered support, yet somehow assumed this gathering was about my requesting assistance. Their defensive reaction told me everything about their expectations and assumptions. It's not about asking for anything, I assured them. Please just trust me that this is important. Dot finally chimed in. We'll be there. But Emma has plans later, so let's keep it brief. Of course, Emma had plans. And of course, they'd already prioritized her schedule over the importance I'd placed on this gathering. Even when I explicitly stated this was significant, their first concern was accommodating Emma's social calendar. I spent the week preparing meticulously. The dinner would be at my apartment, giving me complete control over the environment and timing. I arranged for Jessica to babysit my daughter at her place, ensuring no distractions and protecting my baby from whatever emotional fallout might occur. The menu was deliberately impressive restaurant quality dishes that would subtly signal my financial comfort without being ostentatious. I wanted them focused on the conversation, not wondering how I could afford such an elaborate meal on my supposed shoestring budget. I organized all my documentation carefully. The acquisition contract, trust fund papers, bank statements, screenshots of their messages and conversations. Everything arranged in chronological order to tell the complete story of their assumptions versus reality. The dining room table was set formally with my best dishes and crystal. Glasses items I purchased myself but had never used for family gatherings because they'd never visited my home. The irony wasn't lost on me that the first time my family would see how I actually lived would be the last time they'd be welcome in my space as ignorant judges of my life. By Friday evening, I was ready. My daughter was happy and healthy, completely unaware that her extended family's role in her life was about to change dramatically. Jessica had volunteered to keep her overnight, giving me complete freedom to handle whatever emotional chaos might unfold. Are you nervous? Jessica asked as she packed the diaper bag with everything my daughter would need. Surprisingly, no, I realized. I'm actually looking forward to it. I've been living with their assumptions and judgments for so long. It'll be liberating to finally tell the truth. What if they react badly? I'd been considering this possibility for weeks. Then I'll know exactly where I stand with them. Either way, the pretense ends tomorrow night. Saturday morning, Emma texted, still planning to make this dinner. My plans got moved earlier, so I might actually be able to stay longer. How generous of her to potentially extend her visit to hear my important news. Mom followed up. Should we bring anything? I hope you're not overextending yourself financially for this dinner. Even now, hours before the revelation, she was assuming I couldn't afford to host a proper meal for my own family. The combination of condescension and false concern was exactly the attitude I was looking forward to addressing. Just bring yourselves, I replied. Everything is handled. As the afternoon approached, I felt a calm sense of anticipation. After months of being underestimated, dismissed, and mocked, I was finally going to show them exactly who they'd been so quick to judge. My family thought they were coming to dinner with their struggling, overwhelmed daughter who needed guidance and boundaries. Instead, they were about to meet a successful entrepreneur who'd been documenting their behavior and preparing for this moment of truth. The formal invitation was already bearing fruit for the first time in my daughter's life. My entire family was prioritizing attendance at something I'd requested. It had taken the promise of important news to get their attention, but finally I had it. Soon they'd understand that the most important news was what they'd missed by underestimating me. All along, they arrived exactly on time, which itself was unusual. My family was chronically late to everything except apparently my mysterious dinner invitation. Emma walked in first, already looking around with her typical critical assessment of my living space. "Wow, this place looks different," she said, taking in the formally set table and elegant meal preparation. "Very fancy." "Special occasion cooking?" Mom followed behind her, carrying a bottle of grocery store wine that probably cost less than my appetizer ingredients. The invitation sounded so serious. "I hope everything's all right." Dad entered last, immediately gravitating toward the living room where he could see my large screen TV and expensive sound system. He didn't comment, but I caught him noting details that didn't match their assumptions about my financial situation. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the dining room. "Let's start with dinner, and then I'll share my news." The first course was seared scallops with truffle oil a dish that would cost $60 per person at their favorite restaurant. I watched their faces as they tasted it, surprise flickering across their expressions. "This is incredible, Sarah," Mom said, though she sounded more confused than pleased. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "I've had time to develop some skills," I replied neutrally. Emma was photographing her plate for social media, probably planning to post about the surprisingly good dinner, without mentioning it was prepared by her supposedly struggling sister. Conversation during dinner was typical family small talk, but I could sense their curiosity about my important news. They were expecting something specific, probably an announcement about needing help or admitting I was overwhelmed with single motherhood. Dad complimented the wine I'd served, a bottle that cost more than he typically spent on a week's worth of groceries. "This is excellent. Must have been expensive." "I wanted tonight to be special," I said, savoring the irony. As we finished the main course, herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables, Emma finally addressed the elephant in the room. "So what's this big news? You're being very mysterious." I stood up and walked to the sideboard where I'd arranged my documentation. "Actually, there's something I need to show you first." I returned to the table with a folder and my laptop, setting them down carefully. My family watched with growing curiosity, and I noticed a hint of concern. "Before I share my news, I want to discuss some recent conversations and observations," I began, opening my laptop to display the group chat screenshots. "Sarah, what is this?" Mom asked, leaning forward to read the screen. "This is your family group chat from 3 weeks ago, the one where you discussed my struggles with new motherhood and predicted that I'd eventually become a financial burden you'd need to manage." The silence was immediate and uncomfortable. Emma's face flushed as she recognized her own words, displayed on the screen. Dad shifted in his chair, no longer meeting my eyes. "You weren't supposed to see that," Emma said weakly. "No, I wasn't, but I did. Just like I saw all the Venmo requests you sent while calling my baby a burden. Just like I noticed that none of you visited the hospital, helped with the baby, or offered any support during the most challenging time of my life." Mom started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I've been documenting everything. Your assumptions about my finances, your predictions about my failures, your resentment about imaginary future requests for help. You've all been very clear about how you view me and my daughter." I opened the folder and pulled out the bank statement showing my trust fund balance. "Here's what you didn't know." Emma leaned forward to read the numbers, and her eyes widened. "Impossibly. Is this real?" $45 million, I said calmly. "That's what I set aside for my daughter's future before she was born." Dad grabbed the statement, studying it like he could make the numbers change through sheer disbelief. "This has to be a mistake." I pulled out the acquisition contract next. "Techflow Solutions. The company I built while you all assumed I was barely scraping by on freelance work. Sold for $50 million 6 months ago." "That's impossible," Mom whispered. "You never said anything about a company. Why would I?" "You all made it very clear that my career was unsuccessful freelance nonsense. You were too busy funding Emma's art supplies and gallery meetings to notice that I was building something extraordinary." Emma was staring at the trust fund documents I'd placed in front of her. "She's going to be a multimillionaire." "She already is," I corrected, The trust is active and growing. By the time she's 18, it'll probably be worth over $100 million. The room fell silent, except for the sound of pages turning as they processed the documentation. Bank statements, legal contracts, investment portfolios, proof that everything they'd assumed about my life was completely wrong. Why didn't you tell us? Dad finally asked. I looked at each of them before answering. Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I needed help. And you showed me exactly that: people who would mock my struggles, avoid offering support, and preemptively resent me for problems I never actually had. Mom's face had gone pale. We would have behaved differently if we'd known. That's exactly the problem, I said. Your support and interest shouldn't depend on my bank account balance. The legal trust agreement was 47 pages of ironclad protection for my daughter's future. And watching my family read through it was like watching people realize they'd discarded a winning lottery ticket. Every page they turned revealed another layer of wealth and security they'd dismissed as impossible. This trust structure, Dad said, his voice tight with disbelief. It's more sophisticated than anything we have for our own retirement. Emma was fixated on the distribution schedule. She gets monthly payments starting at 18 and full access at 25. Sarah, do you understand what this means? I understand perfectly, I replied. My daughter will never have to worry about money, education, housing, or any of the basic securities that should be guaranteed. She'll also never have to depend on family members who view her as a burden. Mom was reading the trustee designation section, her face growing more horrified with each detail. Jessica Martinez is listed as alternate trustee. Your friend from work? Jessica has been more family to us in 8 weeks than you've been in 8 months. She deserves legal recognition of that relationship. The panic was setting in now. They were beginning to understand not just what they'd missed, but what they'd lost through their behavior. Emma was the first to try damage control. Sarah, you have to understand, we didn't know. If we'd known about your success, everything would have been different. We would have supported you completely. Would you? I pulled out printed copies of text message threads. Here's Emma asking me for $500 while calling my pregnancy irresponsible. Here's Mom suggesting I consider adoption at my baby shower. Here's the group chat where you all mocked my exhaustion and predicted my failure. I spread the screenshots across the table like evidence in a trial. This is who you are when you think someone needs help. This is how you treat family members you perceive as struggling. Dad was studying the acquisition contract with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. Tech Flow Solutions. I remember you mentioning freelance work, but I never... How long have you been running a company? 4 years. I built it from nothing while living in my tiny apartment, working 18-hour days, sacrificing everything to create something meaningful. And not once did any of you ask about my work or show interest in what I was building. That you never told us it was serious, Mom protested. You said you were freelancing. I said I was working in tech consulting. You assumed it was unsuccessful because it fit your narrative about my life. Emma's hypothetical gallery showings got more family attention than my actual business achievements. Emma's strategy shifted to desperate bargaining. Look, maybe we handled things wrong initially, but we can fix this. We're family. I want to be involved in my niece's life. I want to be the aunt she deserves. The aunt she deserves? I laughed bitterly. The aunt she deserves would have visited the hospital, would have brought meals during those first difficult weeks, would have celebrated her birth instead of calling her a burden. I pulled out the final document, a letter I'd written outlining my conditions for any future relationship. Here's what's going to happen going forward. Dad grabbed the letter immediately, scanning it with growing alarm. These are ... ultimatum terms. These are boundaries, I corrected. If you want any relationship with me or my daughter, here are the requirements. The letter was specific and non-negotiable. No more financial requests or assumptions about my resources. No more dismissive comments about my career or life choices. No more favoritism toward Emma at my expense. And most importantly, any relationship with my daughter would be earned through consistent, genuine involvement, not demanded because of blood relationships. You can't be serious about cutting us off, Mom said, her voice breaking. We're your family. You cut yourselves off, I replied. Every cruel comment, every misvisit, every assumption about my failures, you made your choices. I'm simply acknowledging them. Emma was rereading the trust documents, probably calculating exactly how much money she'd insulted out of her life. Sarah, please. I know I said some terrible things, but I was worried about you. I thought you were in over your head. You thought I was in over my head because it gave you someone to look down on. Your entire identity depends on being the special one, the creative one, the one who deserves support and attention. My success threatens that narrative. The room fell quiet as they processed the magnitude of their miscalculations. They'd spent months treating me like the family failure while I was actually the family's most successful member. They'd worried about my daughter being a financial burden while she was already wealthier than all of them combined. What do you want from us? Dad asked finally. Nothing, I said simply. I don't want your money, your advice, your grudging support, or your guilt-driven attempts to fix this. I want you to understand the consequences of your choices. Mom was crying now, finally understanding that this wasn't a negotiation. Please don't take our granddaughter away from us. I'm not taking her away. You never showed up for her in the first place. I'm simply acknowledging the reality of your involvement in our lives. I stood up and began gathering the documents. The dinner is over. Thank you for coming and for finally showing your true priorities when you thought it mattered. Emma made one last desperate attempt. The money doesn't matter to us, Sarah. We love you and the baby regardless of your bank account. I looked at her directly. If that were true, you would have shown it when you thought I had nothing. The handwritten letter I'd prepared for this moment contained 18 months of carefully considered boundaries, written in my own hand to emphasize the personal nature of these decisions. As my family sat in stunned silence, I read it aloud, each word deliberate and final. To my family, I began, these are the conditions for any future relationship between us. Dad leaned forward, his business instincts recognizing the formal nature of what was happening. Mom continued crying quietly, and Emma stared at me like I'd become someone she didn't recognize. First, no financial requests, loans, or expectations of monetary support from me, ever. You've spent years assuming I would become a burden while never offering help yourselves. That dynamic is permanently over. Emma opened her mouth to protest, but I continued reading. Second, no dismissive comments about my career, life choices, or parenting decisions. I've built a more successful business than anyone in this family has ever imagined. Your opinions about my capabilities are no longer welcome. Sarah, please, Mom interrupted. We were just concerned. Third, I continued, my voice firm. My daughter's relationship with you must be earned through consistent, genuine involvement. Blood relationship doesn't guarantee access to her life. Your presence must add value, not create obligation. The letter went on to detail specific behavioral changes required for any contact with us. Regular planned visits rather than convenient drop-ins. Respectful communication without condescension or judgment. Recognition of my authority as her mother without unsolicited advice or criticism. Fourth, Emma's pattern of financial dependency. This family stops affecting my relationship with you. I will not watch her receive support and attention while my achievements are dismissed. Either you treat your children equally, or you don't have access to mine. Emma's face flushed with anger. This is about me. Sarah, I never asked you to be involved in my finances with Mom and Dad. No, you just benefited from them while they questioned every dollar I spent on myself. You enjoyed being the favored child while they treated my pregnancy like a burden. That contrast ends now. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. These aren't negotiable terms. These are the minimum requirements for any relationship. Going forward, Dad's business mind was working through the implications. And if we agree to these conditions, what does that relationship look like? Supervised visits with my daughter planned in advance. Holiday invitations based on your consistent behavior, not family obligation. Normal grandmother and grandfather activities if you can demonstrate genuine interest and respect. And if we can't agree, Mom asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Then you continue living your lives exactly as you have been, just without pretending you're involved in ours. The silence stretched uncomfortably as they processed the ultimatum. Emma was the first to break, her anger finally overriding her shock. This is insane, Sarah. You can't just cut off your family because we didn't handle one situation perfectly. Everyone makes mistakes. This wasn't one situation, I replied calmly. This was months of behavior showing me exactly what you think of me and my child. You called her a burden before she was born and treated her like an inconvenience after. She arrived. We were worried about you, Emma shouted. You seemed overwhelmed and unprepared. We thought you needed guidance. You thought I needed guidance while I was secretly more successful than all of you combined. Your worry was actually condescension based on completely false assumptions. Dad was rereading the letter, his face grave. Some of these requirements, they're asking us to completely change how we interact as a family. Yes, I said simply. They're asking you to treat me with the same respect and support you've always given Emma. They're asking you to be the grandparents my daughter deserves instead of the ones who see her as a burden. Mom wiped her eyes and looked at me with something approaching desperation. What if we try? What if we really commit to changing? Can't we work through this together? I'd anticipated this response, the bargaining phase where they'd promise anything to avoid consequences. The time for working through this together was when I was pregnant and needed support. The time was when I brought your granddaughter home from the hospital alone. The time was during those first weeks when you could have been building a relationship with her. But we can start now, Mom insisted. We can be different going forward. Maybe you can, I acknowledged. But that would be for your benefit, not mine. I've already built the life and support system my daughter and I need. Your involvement is optional, not necessary. Emma was staring at the trust fund documents again, probably calculating the networking opportunities and social status she'd lost through her behavior. Sarah, I know I messed up, but we're sisters. Doesn't that count for something? Being sisters should have counted when you called my baby a burden. It should have counted when you asked me for money while assuming I was struggling. It should have counted when you posted about parties while I was recovering from childbirth alone. The weight of their mistakes was finally sinking in. They were beginning to understand that this wasn't about money, it was about character, priorities, and the fundamental respect they'd failed to show during the most important time of my life. How long do we have to decide? Dad asked, approaching this like a business negotiation. You don't get to decide anything, I said. I've already made my decisions based on your behavior. You get to choose whether you can meet these requirements going forward, but my boundaries are set regardless. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. Thank you for coming to dinner. Jessica will be bringing my daughter home soon, and I prefer you not be here when she arrives. Please, Mom said, reaching for my hand. Can't we at least see her before we go? She's our granddaughter. I looked at her hand, remembering all the times I'd reached out for support and been dismissed. She's sleeping peacefully at Jessica's house, surrounded by people who've been part of her life since birth. People who showed up when it mattered. Emma made one final attempt at manipulation. You're going to regret this, Sarah. Family is family, and you're throwing that away over pride. I'm protecting my daughter from people who would call her a burden, I replied. If that's throwing away family, then it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. They gathered their things slowly, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. As they reached the door, Dad turned back one final time. The letter, can we keep a copy? I handed him the original. That's yours. Study it carefully. When you're ready to meet those requirements consistently, you can contact me through my attorney. And with that, they left confused, devastated, and finally understanding the true cost of their assumptions and judgments. The blocked contacts list on my phone grew systematically over the following weeks. First, Emma, after she sent 47 text messages ranging from angry accusations to tearful apologies to desperate bargaining attempts. Then Mom, whose voicemails became increasingly frantic as she realized I wasn't responding to her daily calls. Finally, Dad, when his emails shifted from formal requests for reconciliation meetings to threats about cutting me out of the will. The irony of that final threat was particularly rich, being cut out of a will by people who had no idea. I was already wealthier than their entire extended family combined. Jessica brought my daughter home that night after the dinner, finding me calm and oddly peaceful despite the emotional chaos I just unleashed. How did it go? She asked, settling into the nursery chair while my daughter slept in her arms. Exactly as expected, I said. Shock, denial, desperate bargaining, and ultimately the same selfishness that got us here in the first place. Any regrets? I looked at my daughter's peaceful face, thinking about the future I'd secured for her through careful planning and strategic revelation. None. She grew up knowing exactly who she can count on and why. The attempts at contact escalated before they finally stopped. Emma showed up at my building twice, buzzing my apartment and pleading through the intercom. Security cameras captured her dramatic performance for the doorman, complete with tears and claims that I was keeping her niece away from family. Mom tried enlisting mutual friends and distant relatives to intercede on their behalf. My college roommate called, confused about a message she had received about a family crisis that needed mediation. My cousin from across the country sent a bewildered email asking if I was really cutting off Mom and Dad over money. Each flying monkey attempt revealed how they were spinning the narrative. I was the greedy daughter who'd hidden wealth from my struggling family, then cruelly cut them off when they couldn't meet my financial demands. They conveniently omitted their months of mockery, absence, and dismissal. But the beauty of having documented everything was that I could share the actual timeline with anyone who mattered. Jessica had screenshots of their group chat messages. Maria had witnessed their absence at the baby shower. My attorney had copies of every Venmo, request, and cruel text message. The truth was stronger than their revisionist history. 3 months after the dinner, I changed my phone number entirely. The constant notifications of blocked calls and messages were becoming disruptive to the peaceful life I was building. My daughter was developing her own personality, curious, alert, already showing signs of the intelligence that would serve her well in managing her future wealth. She had no idea that somewhere across town, her biological grandparents and aunt were probably still discussing strategies for reconnecting with us. She only knew the consistent love and attention of Jessica, Maria, and the other chosen family members who'd actually shown up for her life. Her nursery was filled with gifts from people who mattered, handmade blankets from neighbors, educational, toys from colleagues, books from friends who wanted to contribute to her development. Nothing from her biological extended family, because they'd never actually tried to participate in her life beyond obligatory acknowledgement. 6 months later, I received a formal letter from their attorney, a last-ditch attempt at legal intimidation, about grandparents' rights and family reunification. Margaret Chen responded with a comprehensive legal brief documenting their abandonment and abuse. Along with evidence that my daughter was thriving without their involvement, their lawyer dropped the case. Immediately, the final contact attempt came on my daughter's first birthday. An elaborate gift delivery with no return address, expensive toys, designer clothes, a savings bond for her education. I donated everything to children's charities and had my attorney send a cease and desist letter. My daughter's first birthday party was everything a celebration should be, filled with people who'd watched her grow, supported her development, and genuinely cared about her well-being. Jessica had organized a beautiful gathering in her backyard, complete with age-appropriate activities and a cake that spelled out "loved" in colorful frosting. As I watched my daughter explore her new toys, surrounded by her chosen family's laughter and affection, I felt complete satisfaction with my decisions. She was growing up in an environment of genuine love and support, free from the conditional affection and toxic dynamics that had characterized my own childhood. The block contacts list was no longer growing. My family had finally stopped trying to force their way back into a life they'd never really been part of. The professional photographer captured the moment perfectly, my daughter and me in our new home, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. At 18 months old, she was walking confidently, babbling in complex sentences that almost made sense, and showing the fearless curiosity that would serve her well in life. The photo would be framed and displayed prominently, a testament to the family we'd built together with people who'd chosen to love us unconditionally. Our new house was everything I dreamed of providing for her: space to run and play, a yard for future swing sets and garden adventures, bedrooms for sleepovers with the chosen cousins who'd become her true extended family. Jessica's kids called her baby cousin and included her in every family gathering. Maria's mother had appointed herself honorary grandmother, bringing homemade cookies and teaching my daughter Spanish. Lullabies. The wealth that had shocked my biological family was being used exactly as I'd planned, to provide security, opportunity, and freedom from the kind of conditional love that had characterized my own childhood. My daughter would never wonder if she was wanted, valued, or supported. She would never have to earn affection through achievement or worry about being dismissed because of someone else's favorite .tech flow. Solutions had continued growing under its new corporate structure, and my consulting income provided more than enough for a comfortable lifestyle. The trust fund remained untouched except for its strategic investments, growing steadily toward the massive inheritance my daughter would receive at 25. But more importantly, she was growing up surrounded by people who'd proven their commitment to her well-being through actions, not just blood relationships. I'd kept one piece of documentation from the revelation. Dinner, a photo that Emma had taken of herself with my daughter during her brief visit to the hospital. In the picture, Emma was clearly focused on getting the perfect angle for social media, while my newborn daughter looked uncomfortable in her inexperienced arms. The contrast with recent photos was stark. Now my daughter laughed joyfully in the arms of people who learned her preferences, understood her personality, and invested time in building genuine relationships with her. Sometimes I wondered if my biological family had learned anything from the experience. If Emma had developed any self-awareness about her entitlement and manipulation. If my parents had recognized the favoritism that had driven their children apart. If any of them understood that their assumptions and judgments had cost them access to someone extraordinary. But mostly, I didn't think about them at all. My days were filled with the delicious chaos of raising a confident, curious toddler who knew she was loved completely and unconditionally. Story time with Jessica's family, playdates with Maria's children, weekend adventures with the chosen relatives who'd embraced U.S. as their own. My daughter's first words had been Mama, and Jess and Cookie, reflecting the people and experiences that actually filled her daily life. She had no memory of people who'd called her a burden or questioned her mother's capabilities. Her earliest attachments were to people who'd shown up consistently with love, attention, and genuine investment in her happiness. The letter I'd written to my biological family remained the final word on those relationships. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that they occasionally asked about us, but I'd made my boundaries clear through legal channels. Any contact would need to demonstrate sustained behavioral change over time, not desperate attempts at quick reconciliation. My daughter deserved family members who would support her dreams, celebrate her achievements, and provide unconditional love through every stage of her development. The people who surrounded us now had proven their commitment through actions when it mattered most. Looking at our family photo, I felt profound satisfaction with the choices I'd made. My daughter was thriving in an environment of genuine love and support. She had financial security beyond most people's dreams and, more importantly, emotional security from people who'd chosen to be part of her life. Sometimes the family we build is stronger than the family we're born into. Sometimes protecting the next generation means breaking cycles that have existed for too long. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the confidence that they are wanted, valued, and loved exactly as they are. My daughter would grow up knowing all of these truths, surrounded by people who'd proven their love through presence, not promises. And that knowledge would be worth more than any trust fund I could ever establish for her future.